So at the end of chapter 30, Jacob is said to be prospering, and the flocks are increasing, and the sheep are increasing. And as we made this comment last Wednesday, it is not, maybe I should say, it's not solely because of Jacob's wise abilities as a farmer and as a breeder of animals that this has happened. That's a part of it. But what the scripture makes abundantly clear is that God is the reason that Jacob is doing so well. He promised Jacob back at Bethel in Genesis 28, which we'll refer to again in just a moment, but God promised Jacob there the same promises that he gave to Jacob's father Isaac and Isaac's father Abraham. And Jacob wants some assurance that God will be with him and help him and bless him. And God, over the next 20 years, while Jacob is serving his uncle Laban, God is with him. And so when it's time for Jacob to leave and to set out on his own and go back to the land of Canaan, Jacob is abundantly blessed and wealthy, according to chapter 30 and verse 43, to the point that as we come into chapter 31, Laban's sons see Jacob's wealth, and they're, who might say, jealous, envious. They are saying that Jacob is only doing as well as he is because everything he got from our father Laban. I don't know if they're suggesting by that he stole from Laban, or are they just saying that he's benefiting from the work that Laban had done? Maybe it's both. But Jacob is doing well. And not only are Laban's sons not happy with this, but even Laban himself in chapter 31 and verse 2, it says that his countenance toward Jacob, his face toward Jacob was different. He too is not pleased with how well Jacob is doing. Now verse 3 of chapter 31, the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you." So now Jacob is going to call together Leah and Rachel, his two wives. Now, I know that we've read about two other women, right? Bilhah and Zilpah, and those are concubines. Those are also legitimate wives. So why doesn't Rachel call them when he's going to have this family meeting? Why do you think he only calls Rachel and Leah? I'm sorry? And who is the confrontation immediately with? It's with their father. Yeah, they're the ones who are the most directly affected by this. So he calls Leah and Rachel. Yeah, the servants, the concubines, I mean, they're his wives too, but they're not daughters of Laban. Okay? So he calls these two, and he is going to lay out his case as to why it is time to leave their father's house. And he's going to talk about how he has been a good servant to their father, but Laban has not acted fairly. Laban has been duplicitous in his business dealings with Jacob. He keeps moving the goalpost, we might say. Jacob says, he's changed my wages 10 times. He can't stick to his word. He's not sticking to the plan. And things have just gotten to the point where it's time for us to go. On top of that, he says in verse 10, "At the time when the flocks conceived that I lifted my eyes, I saw in a dream. And behold, the rams which leaped upon the flocks were streaked, speckled, spotted. The angel of God spoke to me, saying, and I said, Here I am. He said, Lift your eyes now, see. All the rams which leap on the flocks are streaked, speckled, gray, spotted. For I've seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel." Don't miss the significance of that. Jacob, I am the same God who spoke to you 20 years ago at Bethel. Same one. Now, verse 13, at the end of the verse, "Now arise, get out of this land, return to the land of your family." Rachel, Leah, God appeared to me and he told me that it's time for us to go. And he's making this case as to why this has to happen, as to why this decision has been made. Now they respond in verse 14. Is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not considered strangers by him? For he has sold us and completely consumed our money. For all the riches which God has taken from our father are really ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it. They acknowledge, Jacob, our father has not been fair with you. And not only has he not been fair with you, whatever inheritance we might have received, he's taken that away from us and he's exploited us in that. God told you to get out of here, then that's what we need to do. This is the right thing. So, they are going to set out for the land of Canaan in verses 17 through 21. Now, what does the text say that Laban is doing while Jacob and Leah and Rachel and all their children and so forth are preparing to leave? What is Laban doing? All right, he's shearing the sheep. Now, I did a little bit of reading on that, and because if you read through this, you might have thought, well, how could Laban not know that Jacob and his daughters and his grandchildren and all their flocks, I mean, this is a huge caravan of people and animals. How could Laban not know? Well, understand that this is a very different kind of situation here. You know, if somebody who lives under your roof just got up and left, it wouldn't take you 3 days to figure it out. But that wasn't the situation here. Remember, these are tent-dwelling people. And when it was time to shear the sheep, what I read about that said that what they would do is they would take the sheep some distance away. I'm not talking 3 towns over. But they would go a few miles away, and they would take all of the tools and equipment and wagons and oxen, because all this wool that you cut, you're going to load it on the wagons. It's going to have to be pulled back. And if you've got hundreds and hundreds of sheep like Laban would have, this would have been heavy, right? So this is a big job. So does that help you understand how Jacob and all of them could have gotten away without Laban knowing about it? Okay? So Laban is off shearing the sheep. Jacob and all that caravan packs up and they go. Now, not only do they take the things that belong to them, Rachel also took something that didn't belong to her. What did she take? She took Laban's household idols, his household gods. And I'll tell you, I'm not sure what to make of this. There's a lot of different things that I read as to what the significance of these idols were. Here's what I know for sure. These idols do teach us something about Laban. The attachment that he has to these idols, which becomes apparent a little bit later in the story, Laban is very attached to these household gods. These small, they were obviously small because of how Rachel was able to conceal it later. This is a small little idol, and Laban is extremely attached to this idol. So this suggests that Laban has some idolatrous tendencies to him. Okay? He may know about the God of Abraham and Isaac, but he's not wholly committed to the God of Abraham. Okay? So he has some pagan tendencies. What's the significance of these little household gods? I don't know. I read different things about that, and everything I read has some issues with it. So I'm not sure what the answer is. There was one commentator who said that what this little god represented was that whoever possessed it was to be the recipient of the inheritance. Okay? And so you read that and you think, oh, that makes sense, because Rachel is taking this and she's saying, look, Dad, you exploited all of our wealth. You took our inheritance away. I'm going to take this thing to say to people, I'm the one who should have gotten the inheritance. Okay? Well, I kind of want to agree with that, but here's the big problem with it. This story tells us about Rachel and Leah actively leaving the place of their inheritance. Whatever inheritance Laban would have had for them would have come in the form of flocks and cattle and sheep and all of that, and they're leaving it, and they're okay with leaving it. So I kind of struggle to see that. I don't know exactly what these are all about. Okay? If you have a better idea, I'm open to hearing it.
He said he had already spent it.
That's right. Yeah, so it must have been a monetary element. Of course, they could have had some other, through the form of the livestock, some other inheritance. But yeah, he'd already spent it, they said. Sandy?
Just coming from the bad side of women, if she was very upset with her dad, what better way to...
Stick it to him. Yeah, I think that's possible. And maybe even likely. I still don't understand really the significance of what the idol served, right? But yeah, Dad was mistreating us, and so I'm going to do this because I know that'll hit him where it hurts, right? I can see that. Okay? All right. Yes, Wayne.
The scripture reads to me as if God was unhappy with Laban for some reason. It doesn't specify what it is. The gods could have been a part of it, but it specifically says here that, in my reading of it at least, that God was unhappy with Laban and how he was acting. Whatever that means, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think you also see that when God speaks to Laban and says, when you talk to Jacob, you don't say anything good or bad, right? You've got no footing to stand on here, okay? All right. Anybody else? Melanie?
No, it wouldn't be the same for women as it is for men, but Rachel's not the firstborn.
True. Yes. True. You guys are talkative this morning. Y'all had more coffee than I did today. Good for you. That's good. I only had 1 cup this morning. Don't worry, I'll have 3 this afternoon. Okay. All right. Now, it's 3 days before Laban gets word that Jacob and his daughters and his grandchildren and all that have gone on. And when Laban gets this news that they have left suddenly with no notice, he immediately gathers up some things and some people and begins to pursue Jacob. Now, how long did it take him to catch up and overtake Jacob? 7 days, it says in chapter 3 and verse 23, and he overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. But God had come, this is verse 24, to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said to him, be careful that you speak to Jacob neither good nor bad. So Laban overtook Jacob. Now, it's easy to understand how that would have been possible. Jacob is traveling with a huge caravan of people and animals. Laban's only traveling with himself, the animal that he's riding on, and maybe a couple of others, right? I mean, it's adults only. There's no children that are traveling to slow them down and potty breaks and rest stops and all that kind of thing. So it's easy to see that Laban would catch up to him. Now, I've put a map on the next slide, so we'll have to come to that in just a moment. But all of these things that happen within a very relatively close area, okay? So a lot of these things are happening in very close proximity to one another. So when Laban overtakes Jacob, Laban accuses him of stealing away with his daughters. You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren. Okay, so he pulls the emotional card. But then, and this was the bigger thing to him, it seems, you stole my household gods. That was the bigger thing. Because as the story unfolds, Laban doesn't say, Jacob, I tell you what, I'll forgive you if you'll just let me hug and kiss my grandkids. He says, you took my idols and I'm here to find them. And the story shows how Laban is going to, at Jacob's permission, but Laban is going to go and start searching all the tents and searching through the bags and the suitcases looking for his household gods. What's he more concerned about? See, Rachel was right. This really did hit him where it hurt. So, when Laban searches all of their things at Jacob's invitation, Jacob even said in verse 32, with whomever you find your gods, do not let them live. You find somebody in my family who took your household gods, don't let them live. Uh-oh. The text tells us Jacob doesn't know that Rachel took them. He doesn't know that. So he confidently says, let them die. If they stole from you, let them die. I've not been unfair towards you. Now, Laban searches all the tents. He doesn't find them. Rachel has hidden the idols in the sack on the camel that she was riding. And when her father approached her, sneaky devil that she is, she's been learning something from her husband, the deceiver. What does she tell her father? You don't have to answer if you don't feel like it. She says, the manner of women is with me. Which means she would be considered, according to the law of Moses at least, what? Unclean. Not sinful, okay? By the way, okay, we're looking forward here to next quarter as we talk about the law of Moses. The word unclean doesn't mean sinful, okay? There's nothing sinful about a woman experiencing her monthly period. It's not sinful, but she's called unclean. So when she says this to her father Laban, Laban says, okay, I understand. I won't come near. How convenient that she's able to hide these gods and say that. So, after then Laban searches and he doesn't find these gods, Laban was angry before. Now who's angry? Jacob is angry. You came here into my house accusing me of theft. And now you've proven that we didn't steal anything. Now remember, Jacob doesn't know what Rachel did. But he feels vindicated. I told you we didn't steal it. You searched, you didn't find anything. And now Jacob is angry. And so he's going to lay out his case as to why else he has the right to be angry with Laban. I served you for 20 years. I worked hard for you. When I was taking care of your flocks and your herds, they weren't dying, they weren't sick, they were healthy, they were strong, they were productive. I multiplied your folds. I did so much good for you, and you come here accusing me of theft, and you come here saying that what I have done is unjust. What is wrong with you, Laban? And Laban can't deny what Jacob has said. You're right. I did prosper when you were serving in my house. I did do well. I did become more wealthy because of you. So you know what, Jacob? Why don't we just agree to make a covenant with each other and let's be at peace. So the rest of the chapter, verses 43 through 55, describe this covenant, this agreement that they enter into. They put up a heap of stones and they give names to it. They claim that God is the witness of their dealings with one another, and they agree to part ways and not let their paths cross again. Laban turns around and goes back home to Haran, and Jacob and company will continue making their way to Canaan. All right. Questions or comments about Jacob and Laban?
Even though Laban was an idol worshiper, God spoke to him.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've seen that before in Genesis, right? With Abimelech. Don't touch that woman. You know, she's that man's wife. Yeah. Okay. Joe.
Laban acknowledged that God talked to him.
Yeah.
He acknowledged that he's the God of Jacob's father, yet he still focused on how to do God.
Yeah. Explain that to us.
Blind. My God's back, even though you got
Right, right. All right, so let me come over here and show you this map. Haran is way up here, okay? So Jacob and family have come down from Haran. And if you see this red line that comes in on the right side of the screen here, that shows you the path that they are taking in our studies today. So they are coming down through, you'll see Mahanaim, which we'll talk about in just a moment. You see Penuel, you see Succoth, and then Shechem. All of those places right there are all within very close proximity to one another. If you see the red box down here in the bottom right corner, it shows just how close these places are and how they follow the Jabbok River, which runs into the Jordan River. Okay, so these things all happen within a very close distance of one another. So these things are happening quite quickly. So now that Jacob and Laban have parted ways, I'm going to leave this map up there for just another moment before I advance this slide. But now that Jacob and Laban have parted ways, Jacob is going to keep making his way into the land of Canaan, but Esau is surely going to know that Jacob has come back. You don't travel with the number of people that Jacob has, and the number of camels and sheep and oxen and so forth, without people knowing that you're traveling through. Esau is going to know about this, so Jacob realizes, I have to confront my brother. So Jacob, chapter 32 and verse 1, went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim, or two camps. There's my camp, my tents, my people, my flocks and herds, and there's God's camp of angels. There's two camps, and so that's the name that he gives the place. This is really interesting. Nothing else is said about this encounter with these angels. It just says that God sent angels there to Jacob and he saw them. It doesn't tell us anything about what they did, what they said, if they did or said anything. Maybe they were just there and Jacob saw them. But what's significant about this? Well, if you go back to our map here, if you think about where Jacob has been, Jacob leaves his homeland with when he has stolen the blessing from Esau, and he is leaving and he's heading up north to Haran, way up here. At Bethel, he has the dream of the ladder reaching from earth up into heaven, and what was going up and down on the ladder? Angels. So on Jacob's way out of Canaan, he saw a dream with angels. Now, 20 years later, he's on his way back into Canaan, and he has another sight of angels. Different place, but he sees these angels once again. By the way, the only time the expression, the angels of God, appears, 2 times, both in Genesis, both those visions of Jacob. All right. Is Jacob worried about seeing Esau again? Yes, he is. 20 years have passed, and he is worried about meeting his brother, because the last time he saw his brother, Esau wanted to kill him. But that was 20 years ago. Yes, but think about what Jacob did. He took his brother's right of inheritance. Could there potentially be 20-year consequences for that? Yes. Absolutely. We're talking life-changing amount of wealth here. Absolutely there could be consequences for that. So Jacob is still worried. Maybe Esau is still angry. Now Esau, of course, you'll remember Genesis 25 and verse 30 is the father of what nation? Esau is the father of what nation? Edom, okay? And so it tells us in chapter 32 and in verse 3, Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. That's where Esau's people have settled, and this country, the Edomites, has arisen. Esau's doing just fine, as we find out in the story. He's doing well. Missing out on his father's inheritance and blessing, he's still doing okay. So Jacob is preparing to meet Esau, and while he's ready to go back in and to go back into Canaan, then he has this experience with these angels. I think that would have given him some courage. It would have encouraged him to say, listen, Jacob, I'm still with you. I've promised. I am here to help you. And this was just a reminder. Again, whatever those angels were saying or doing, it was a reminder that God is with Jacob. Now, when he sends his servants ahead to Edom, Let me go back to my map here. Edom is down here. Okay? Jacob's up here. Edom's down here. So he sends messengers from up here down to Edom, and then Esau is going to come up to come and meet Jacob. So when he sends these messengers, he tells them in verse 5 to say, I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male, female servants. I've sent to tell my Lord that I may find favor in your sight. So the messengers came back to Jacob with what seems like bad news. Esau is coming, and he has 400 men with him. So Jacob's immediate reaction would be, oh no, he's still mad. And he's coming with an army to take away everything that I have. So Jacob then sends a gift. He prepares a gift. Quite a gift, too. 550 animals of various kinds to be sent ahead to Esau. Maybe, verse 20, maybe Jacob thinks this will appease him. Maybe this will make him look favorably upon me. So when Jacob sends his servants ahead with all of these animals, with these gifts, it says in verse 22 that he arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, his 11 sons. His daughter Dinah was there too. She's just not mentioned. And they crossed over the ford of the Jabbok River. He took them, sent them over the brook, and sent over what he had. Then Jacob was left alone. So he sends them across the river. He stays behind. We'll catch up with them later. And while he is alone, verse 24 says, a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. A man appears, and Jacob wrestles with this man all night. They are fighting for a long time, apparently. I'm not sure at what point in the night the fight began, but it started during the night and it continued until daybreak. Now, verse 25 says, when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he, this assailant, whomever he is, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, and the socket of his hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. This would have been a crippling blow, the kind that stopped the fight. Okay? Jacob can no longer fight because his hip is literally dislocated. He probably can't even stand up. This ends the fight. Okay, we've been wrestling for hours. Boom. Now it's over. Fight is finished. Now, Jacob has, I think now, at least an indication. Okay, this is a supernatural assailant. How in the world? I mean, if this guy could have done this at the beginning of the fight, why didn't he do it? So Jacob realizes, okay, I'm not dealing with just another man here. Who is he dealing with? The text tells us, doesn't it? Yeah. So in verse 28, the assailant says to Jacob, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and prevailed, or have won. Well, you say, well, he didn't win. I mean, he dislocated his hip, and that was the end of the fight. Yes, it means he prevailed in the sense that he survived. He's not dead, okay? Your name is no longer Jacob, it's Israel, which means, does your footnote tell you something? What does Israel mean? What? Striving with God, which is what Jacob did. Now, also, we're not going to go analyze this, but I'm just going to give you the reference. Hosea chapter 12 and verse 5 also references this event and says that Jacob wrestled with God. Okay, so the scripture makes this clear. Jacob was fighting against God, not just a man. Now, God came in the appearance of a man, apparently, but this was not just an ordinary man. There's a really fascinating account that I think we could spend a lot of time talking about. Obviously, we don't have the time to say everything we'd like to say. If you're teaching the kids next quarter, here's what we need to emphasize to them. This is where Jacob's name is changed to Israel. This is where the nation of Israel really gets its name. Okay? We need to emphasize that to the children. That's one of the things of great significance in the story for them. Okay? Now, a little bit deeper application for us who are adults. I think Jacob needed to see that his own strength is not what made him successful. It wasn't his own strength that made him prosperous and blessed. It would be because of the hand of God that Jacob would become the great patriarch that we know him to be. God made him what he is. It wasn't his deceitful scheming that has thus far characterized his life. It was not his cunning and craftiness that gave him advancement and put him ahead. Yeah, that had a part in it, but God is working in Jacob's life. And I think there's also something else to think about. He has striven with Esau and he won. He has striven with Laban and he won. But now he has striven with God and he must humble himself before God. Because although he struggled with God and he survived, you're not going to wrestle against God and win in the sense of defeating him and overcoming him. And I think perhaps our greatest strivings in life as Christians may be those wherein we strive against God. It may be those times where we wrestle with God because we're facing difficulties in life and we're trying to make sense of it. God, why did you let this happen? God, why are you doing this to me? And we struggle with those kinds of things. We're wrestling with God in those moments. But like Jacob, may we wrestle with God and survive. Come through, be stronger, be changed and transformed as God allows us to struggle with him in that. Okay, I think there's something to that. Joe?
I don't see that it indicates one way or the other, but do we know if this is a temporary issue with this hip, or is this permanent and going to be limping for the rest of his life?
I don't know. It does, in the immediate aftermath, it does mention that he walked with a limp as he passed through the river and went on into Canaan. I don't know if it lasted forever or not. That's a good question.
Because it seems like if it was permanent, it might be a perpetual reminder of this incident.
Yeah, kind of a thorn in the flesh, as it were, right? Yeah, that's a good thought. Okay, Phil?
Jacob saw God face to face.
Yeah, you don't survive that. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Good. All right. Now, chapter 33, after this break where he wrestles with God, so a lot of chapter 32 is the fear about Esau, and then you have this break in the story with wrestling with God, but now we jump back to the Esau narrative. And I don't think that's a coincidence either. Again, this is God saying to Jacob, I'm with you, okay? If you can wrestle with me, you can face your brother. What have you got to worry about? Okay? So, chapter 33, verses 1 through 17, he's reunited with Esau. So after he passes over the Jabbok River, he reunites with his family, and then he later sees his brother Esau coming near, and he goes out in front of all of his clan. He goes out in the front of them to see his brother, because he is expecting this to go very badly. But when Esau arrived, he embraced Jacob, he kissed his brother, and they wept together. And what a blessing that this was for Jacob. This unexpected surprise that Esau, not only is Esau not angry and wanting to kill him, but Esau expresses love for his brother as they reunite. And Jacob even says in chapter 33 and verse 10, did you notice this? If I found favor in your sight, then receive my gift from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face as though I had seen the face of God. He literally did just see the face of God. That's what he said back in chapter 32 when he named this place Penuel. And he says, Esau, this is such a relief. It's as if I'm seeing the face of God again. Okay? So both of the brothers part in peace. Esau going back to Edom, Jacob and his family going on to Succoth, and my map's not up there anymore, and then to Shechem. And once they get to Shechem, Jacob purchases some land and sets up their tents, their home site there, and that becomes significant because of where we go in the next story. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your comments today.